Joke at the baddest. baddest.
Good afternoon, Virgin Islands. Good afternoon to my colleagues. First of all, I'd like to apologize for the delay start. Certainly, we had some flight complications and running late. You know, traffic is not always your friend, so we're happy to be here. I want to thank you for being here today. My colleagues and I felt it was important to convene this press conference to discuss the legislature's ongoing efforts to support the Virgin Islands Water and Power Authority through its financial crisis. It has been a balancing act as we consider the limited funds at our disposal, along with the needs of our community. The Senate has worked collaboratively with the administration of Governor Albert Bryan to ensure that WAPA continues to operate without the outages that are disruptive to our residents, businesses, and the economy. We have seen time and time again where the needs of the authority are prioritized over the needs of small businesses, business owners, and vendors who are continually asked to wait for payments while cash is funneled to the authority. My colleagues and I completely understand the devastating consequences if measures are not taken to keep WAPA solvent and operational. What is missing from this entire exercise is accountability. In the past 5 years, the Senate has met in this very same legislative chamber multiple times to address WAPA's chronic cash shortfall, which affects its ability to purchase propane. In December of 2019, the legislature appropriated $6 million to the authority as a loan. April of 2020, Governor Bryan utilized funds available through the Corona Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, CARES Act, to subsidize WAPA through the Yes, Your Energy Stimulus Program. This program credited accounts in the amount of $500 for commercial and $250 for residential at the tune of $15 million. April of 2023, the legislature appropriated $45 million to WAPA for the buyout of Vitol and acquisition of LPG facilities. In the time period between the implementation of the YES program and the appropriation for the Vitol buyout, Governor Bryan channeled an additional $97 million in funds available through the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, to further subsidize WAPA and offset the rate increases being passed on to Virgin Islands consumers. April of 2024, this past weekend, Governor Bryan pledged $4 million to WAPA's fuel suppliers to bring an end to the rotating power outages on St. Thomas. On St. Croix, the ongoing power outages continue to affect the community. I just left St. Croix, and again, we're out of power in some instances on St. Croix. As recently as December, my colleagues and I met with Governor Bryan and his team to discuss options to bring financial stability to the utility. Governor Bryan and his team did not send down any legislation to this body to act upon those requests. At the December 19, 2023 legislative session, there was an attempt to establish a single-payer fund specifically for the semi-autonomous agencies. However, that strategy was not embraced by the majority of my colleagues who felt that a deeper dive was needed on this approach. Today, our challenge is to fund the Virgin Islands Waste Management Authority and the Territories Hospital so that they can meet their WAPA obligations. Governor Bryan said that these organizations are underfunded. However, appropriations to these agencies are made based on the parameters outlined in the governor's own budget requests. Both WAPA and the executive branch have been resistant to the Senate's efforts to enforce accountability, whether it's through the restructuring of the board, which was challenged by the governor and his legal team. We are presently awaiting the Virgin Islands Supreme Court's decision, and I'm confident that the legislature will prevail in this matter. At this time, there is no clear pathway to closing the Vitol transaction. We are told that HUD committed to approve the deal, but there has been no movement towards resolution. We've also learned that the turnaround management consultant mandated by Act 8471 requires an additional $500,000 payment. While this came as a surprise, we are ready to see a vendor selected and work begin to help optimize WAPA's operation. One way of doing this would be to have the same operating units in both districts, which is more financially prudent and supports maintenance and exchange of parts. We also expect that WAPA will continue to work towards interconnectivity agreement and greater accountability by providing past due audits and also the connection that's occurring with our solar farms. As the holder of the territory's purse string, the legislature must exercise its fiduciary responsibility and also be good stewards of our limited financial resources. Decisions should not be made in a vacuum and without the full cooperation and collaboration of our partners to be both transparent and accountable. It's no secret that this body had moved towards addressing some of this with the Budget, Finance, and Appropriation Committee hearing scheduled for tomorrow, and a subsequent session, a special session, to act upon whatever was the outcome of that discussion tomorrow. We're also concerned that the many vendors that continue to wait for payment at the tune of over $80 million should be paid. We're equally concerned that the $25 million that is owed and promised as a portion of the payment to our retirees, that too should be given priority and be paid in short order. We knew that $2.5 million have already gone out, and we look forward to the remainder of that money to go out. So we want to hear what's the priority given to that as well. At this time, I'll ask the chair of the Finance Committee, the Budget, Appropriation, and Finance Committee, Senator Donna Fred Gregory, to say a few words.
Good afternoon to the people of the United States Virgin Islands. I want to take this opportunity to thank Senate President Novalee Francis Jr. for allowing me this opportunity as chair of the Committee on Budget, Appropriations, and Finance to address the governor's executive order issued yesterday regarding the Virgin Islands Water and Power Authority. While I completely understand, while my colleagues and I completely understand and fully support the immediate need to end rotating power outages in the Virgin Islands by putting WAPA on a firm financial footing, any decision to pay WAPA using general funds of the people of the Virgin Islands should be a part of the legislative process. The legislature has oversight responsibility over how government funds are to be spent. The authority is found in Section 8 of the Revised Organic Act of 48 USC Section 1574, which serves as the Constitution of the United States Virgin Islands. As chair of the Budget, Appropriations, and Finance Committee of the 35th Legislature, I wish to set the record straight about the committee's attempts to address the financial affairs of the government of the Virgin Islands over the past 4 months. In December of 2023, the governor requested a meeting with the members of the legislature of the Virgin Islands to discuss the possibilities to seek a line of credit to address vendor payments and outstanding amounts owed to WAPA by semi-autonomous agencies, i.e. the hospitals and the Virgin Islands Waste Management Authority, and the possibility of approaching a bank to utilize the budget stabilization funds for the line of credit, our rainy day fund, to do so. As a result of this request, there were many unanswered questions asked by myself as well as by my colleagues. As a result, we convened a Committee on Budget Appropriations and Finance meeting on January 9th of 2024, which asked specific questions of the governor's financial team. The meeting ended, as our community is fully aware, with many unanswered questions, i.e., updated revenue collections, status of the last line of credit approved in FY 2023, and the status of the FY 2024 allotments. To date, as of this morning, I checked the Department of Finance's website, and the revenues that are shared with our community are only revenues up until January of 2024. We are now in the third quarter of fiscal year 2024. That is alarming to us as legislators. Subsequent to the January 19 hearing, correspondence was sent to the financial team for additional information requested by my colleagues and myself. To date, we have not received the requested information. It is our responsibility to ensure that once we make decisions within the institution of the legislature, we are making decisions based on informed information. And I wish to remind myself, our colleagues, our entire community, there is nothing that prevents the governor of the United States Virgin Islands from sending down legislation to this institution or calling the legislature of the Virgin Islands into special session to address matters of public interest. It is perplexing that the leaders of the Virgin Islands Water and Power Authority and the executive branch leadership would wait until the 12th hour to take action and approach the legislature in full crisis mode. I want to make myself abundantly clear. The legislature became aware of this situation after WAPA made the decision to conduct rolling blackouts. Just like all of us in here read it in the news, legislators read it in the news. That's when it was released to the public, when we became informed. This matter was brought to the institution, as far as I know, late last week when I was contacted. And immediately, the Committee on Budget Appropriations and Finance caucused to discuss how best to address this vexing issue of the amounts owed by the two hospitals and the Virgin Islands Waste Management Authority. Albeit, annually, we provide appropriations to these three entities. And there were many questions that resulted in the discussions that we had. One, why, when the $96 million in ARPA funds were issued to the Virgin Islands Water and Power Authority, why there were no deliverables or accountability measures attached by our Chief Executive to WAPA. Two, when the additional $4 million was paid last week, why were there no accountability measures or deliverables attached to these dollars? Three, the big question is, once the $11 million is paid to WAPA, that's currently on the table, that's currently the reason why we're having this discussion, that's owed by these semi-autonomous entities, what does that mean in the next 3 months? Are we going to be standing here again, having this very, very same conversation? Or does this issue go away? I say not. I say that it is time for us, and it's not for the lack of the legislature asking for the opportunity to collaborate on these issues. The issues will not go away absent of collaboration. This is not a one-man show. When the chief executive was asked these questions that I shared earlier, we were told very adamantly the deliverables were to keep the lights on. That was the answer. That's it, and nothing else. We agree, and I'm certain that all my colleagues agree, that keeping the lights on for our people is our responsibility. However, we cannot do this individually. We must work together collectively to get this done. It cannot be done in a vacuum. These matters, the matters surrounding WAPA, remains a vexing issue for our community, but we cannot, I'm certain that all of us would agree, that we cannot wait until our vendors cut us off before finding long-term solutions, as these issues are not new issues. And I'm here to report that I am a member of the National Conference of State Legislators, and I attend many meetings abroad, stateside. And when I speak to my colleagues abroad, as a result of COVID-19 and all of the federal dollars that came into those states are seeing surpluses, seeing a surplus over and over in their states. We should be no different. We have to do a better job of managing our resources. The committee petitioned to convene an emergency hearing to discuss how we could meet this $11 million request and to dig deeper and get accurate information to make informed decisions. And equally important, if we are going to be using the Budget Stabilization Fund, a fund that the legislature spent the past 4 to 5 years building because it was completely depleted, to ensure a path to the replenishment of those fund or of that fund. We explored the option that the government of the Virgin Islands and all its branches make a 4-month advance utility payment to WAPA, totaling approximately $11 million, while WAPA works, all of us work to provide a plan to address this vexing issue when it comes to the oil. This approach was used as these amounts are already appropriated. So we did not think about this lightly. These funds are already appropriated and tied to our projected revenue collections for FY 2024, and would allow for the replenishment of the Budget Stabilization Fund. It will be irresponsible of all of us here to turn our backs on the Budget Stabilization Fund that we have spent so much time and energy trying to build up over the past 4 years. Further, in December 2019, the GVI loaned $6 million to WAPA, and we are prepared to offset that amount owed by the hospitals and Waste Management Authority, leaving the balance at approximately, give or take, $5 million. Convening the emergency hearing of the Committee on Budget Appropriations and Finance is important to get a clear understanding of WAPA's revenues and cost structure, including the monthly costs of fuel. Because when we asked the question, what does it really cost? We were unable to get an answer. We are not inclined, as I said earlier, to raid the Rainy Day Fund, absent of a plan to replenish it. Further, there were assertions made about the legislature's underfunding of our hospitals in particular. I wish to report the legislature appropriated in fiscal year 22, 23, and 24, approximately $10 million more to the hospitals than were submitted or recommended by the executive branch's budget. In closing, As chair of the Committee on Budget Appropriations and Finance, my committee members and my colleagues and I are committed to ensuring accountability, as our Senate President shared, and transparency in government, and that the information the legislature requests is provided so we can make informed decisions. We recognize the importance of working together as co-equal branches of government, as we cannot address the mammoth task of solving the vexing issues facing our community with regards to WAPA in a unilateral manner. God bless you all. President?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And before we open up for questions, I'd just like to, we have the Majority Leader in the District of St. Croix, and he has a few comments as well. Senator Gittens, you're recognized.
Thank you, and good afternoon to the people of the Virgin Islands and abroad. The Senate President started off talking about accountability. And we as a legislative body have taken aggressive actions towards assisting and reforming the Water and Power Authority over the past 6 years in particular, and honestly, it hasn't been easy. There is a very long list of all the bills we have passed here in this legislature, funds we have appropriated, and hearings we have held. Our legislation to help fix the Water and Power Authority has been vetoed and fought in court. We have had to subpoena documents and officials from the authority and even the Public Service Commission. We have granted this administration just about every request it has made regarding the authority, even appropriating monies to pay WAPA insane debt to Vital, which we were told would resolve many of the problems at the utility. And this body was not even allowed to see the agreement that was struck between Vital to supposedly settle this debt. Things that make you go, This administration has fought true reform at every turn and has taken no steps to go after those who are primarily responsible for where we find ourselves today. With outrageous debts to Vital, Agreco, and other vendors, as well as horrendous deals for smart meters that never worked properly, a crumbling infrastructure, and now the ultimate result being rolling blackouts. If our governor truly wants reform at the authority, why has the administration gone to the extreme of going to the court to fight against the restructuring of the Water and Power Authority Board? My disappointment was that back in 2021, we as a legislative body did not insert ourselves to petition the court to dismiss the administration's frivolous claims. There's clear collusion between the administration and the Water and Power Authority. Why has the governor vetoed efforts for additional audits? Where are the long-promised solar projects? Why has the administration wasted time and taxpayers' dollars fighting the legislature of the Virgin Islands, and rather the people of the Virgin Islands, in court when they could be suing Vital or AMI, the smart metering company? Everybody else who did work with Vital sued them. Look at the other jurisdictions The Virgin Islands is the only jurisdiction that have not taken these people to task. Again, things that make you go, WAPA was allowed to gamble away money with no objection or pushback from the administration. As just one more example of legislative action, it was not until we, this legislative body, subpoenaed WAPA officials before this body on multiple occasions that WAPA took steps to cancel some of the outrageous leases for multiple properties. I don't think that any one of us have yet forgotten that WAPA was paying some $40,000 plus a month to rent a dot patch parking lot on St. Thomas. As just one example, for how many years? The territory was given millions upon millions in federal dollars to address WAPA through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act and Hurricane Recovery Funding. The COVID funding under the CARES Act that should have been used for health care related matters or first responders was channeled to WAPA by this administration. And we are told we should be happy that they have been subsidizing WAPA. But why should we have to subsidize the cost of electricity when we are already being charged the highest rates in the nation? Placing blame will not help resolve this issue, but we need to look with clear eyes at what has transpired in recent years. It is high time that we take the bull by the horns. If we are truly to protect the ratepayers of this territory, the administration needs to be more aggressive and stop protecting its friends and start protecting the people of the Virgin Islands. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Majority Leader, Senator Kenneth Gittins. And next we'll just hear from the Minority Leader, Senator Dwayne M. DeGraff.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, everyone. In addition to the things that my colleagues have said, I think why we're here is to show that, first of all, the minority caucus, we support the majority on this to hold one head as a branch of government going forward in every step. However, I think it has to be said that we have to pump the brakes on the governor and the disrespect that the governor is showing to this branch of government. So therefore, if we have to take this to court, then so be it. But it cannot be where the governor calls a state of emergency that we're in, because it makes everything we are saying here moot. We have to put an end to that and go forward collectively. That is our stance as a minority, to support and still sit down to the table with the governor to make a difference going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minority Leader. At this time, we'd like to open the floor for questions. So far, we've been notified that we have WTJX Tom Ader on standby, as well as here in the chambers, we do have the VI Consortium, Mr. Ernest Gilbert. Tom Ader, question?
Given the governor's declaration of the state of emergency to pay the WAPA debt owed to Agreco, is it still necessary to hold tomorrow's committee meeting and session on Thursday?
I will quickly answer that, and then I'll ask the chair of the Appropriations, Budget Appropriations and Finance Committee to weigh in as well. Obviously, we have heard about the payment to Agreco at the tune of $2.5 million. There's still a discussion in regards to exactly how much is owed by our hospital, as well as waste management. The ask originally was for $11 million. At that time, all we have is information in regards to the payment to Agreco for $2.3 million. Madam Chair.
Thank you for the question, Tom. I firmly believe that it is a matter of critical importance that the Committee on Budget, Finance, and Appropriation does meet on tomorrow to discuss the matters of WAPA, because as I've said earlier when I spoke, we don't have any information as it relates to what the ask is, the monthly fuel costs for WAPA. We don't have any information around WAPA's current financials. And it also will help us to make some decisions around whether or not we have to dig deep to determine whether or not there is a further opportunity because of the rising costs of fuel as a result of the wars in the Middle East, whether or not that, this government may literally have to step up and begin to do some subsidies around WAPA. So we have to flesh out the issues. We have to have the deep dive conversation, in addition to the fact that the community needs to know. Thank you.
As a follow-up, I understand that the OMB and finance directors have declined to attend tomorrow's committee meeting given the governor's state of emergency declaration. How would their absence impact the hearing?
It's unfortunate that I did receive correspondence from an email, actually, from the budget director advising us that as a result of the state of emergency, that the governor's team, which we invited the OMB director as well as the finance commissioner, that they will not be attending. We have not received any such notice from the folks at WAPA or the hospitals. However, it will impact the discussion because it does not allow us an opportunity to dig deep into what the financials are of this government. And I'm not certain what one has to do with the next. I think what's critical is that the community needs an understanding, a clear picture of what our government finances are. And it's also clear to me that those that are making some of the decisions, either the information is not being provided or they themselves don't have the information as it relates to the updated information around the financials of this government. And when I say financials, I mean the revenues. We are only seeing revenues up to January, the complete revenues, and then the internal revenue, the BIR, they are showing their revenues up to February. We are now in April. Deep down into April, actually, we should have already seen those revenues updated. So it's important that we get that information from the government. It's important that our people get the information from the government. And we were hoping to see if they were able to true up any of the revenues that were generated during the tax season. So lacking of that information does have a significant impact on our ability to make decisions. So, if we don't have that information, I'm not certain how we are expected to make decisions here as legislators.
I think additionally, Tom, what's concerning as well is the lack of information available on the website, like the chair have indicated. But we do have a post-audit division within the legislature, and their responsibility really is to do some of the real-time analysis of what's happening in terms of the government coffers, and not having that information readily available. Even though you hear a lot of discussion about the transparency of information, it's critical that we're able to gain that information so that we could be able to make informed decision. We have expressed that to the administration, the criticality of having this website updated. That's what we utilize for our information, as well as the public. They have an opportunity, again, to see what's happening in real time if we're really truly about transparency. Any other question?
Yes. Is the governor's declaration for the state of emergency a way to bypass the legislative appropriation process?
The straight answer to that is yes. Obviously, that is the purpose of it. There was a commitment made by the governor to Agreco to be able to make a payment in a timely fashion on the behalf of WAPA, and thus I believe, is why he went the route of the state of emergency. What's concerning to us is that, within that time period, we want to make sure that because there is a lot of leverage available to the governor during this declaration of the state of emergency, and we want to make sure that there is some control mechanism put in place as we continue to drive the issue of accountability and deliverables, from the Water and Power Authority as any other payment that will be coming out of the budget stabilization fund. So we're very concerned, and we're hoping that at some point that we'll be able to get from the governor exactly his intent during this period by sending down a bill for us to be able to act upon, or that we'll take the necessary action to make sure we're closing the door and some of this authority, because we don't want, again, for the circumvention of exactly what the legislature is responsible for, which is a purse string of this government.
Is the budget stabilization fund the same as the rainy day fund?
It is, yes.
And the governor does not need legislative approval to access this fund, correct?
He does need legislation, hence the state of emergency for the purpose of circumvention, in our opinion.
Clarification. How much is in the budget stabilization fund?
As far as we are aware, and again, we on an annual basis make sure that it's replenished during our budget preparation. And as far as we know, there's $21 million currently in the rainy day fund.
One more question. What would the claim be if the legislature took the governor to court?
Say a question again, please.
In reference to Senator DeGraff's comment, what would the claim be if the legislature took the governor to court?
Well, again, we want to make sure that we're exerting our authority to make sure that we're part of this process. We're tasked with the responsibility of the purse string of this government, and it is, we don't want to allow for the governor to have that full authority then for the expenditures without some control mechanism put in place.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll come to Mr. Gilbert. Ernest?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
So there are a few questions, and I want to follow up quickly. You said, so are you agreeing that the governor is within his authority based on the state of emergency declaration, that he could then access those funds and take the actions that he's taken to pay those bills?
That matter is still under review. We have our legal counsel that's truly looking at the four corners of the revised Organic Act as well as the law as it pertains to a state of emergency declaration to ensure that he do have that authority. So we continue to await a final determination, and part of it is truly to be able to explore the executive order, to see exactly what is the intent of the governor during this state of emergency.
So I suppose it's not as clear-cut as it should be, or else legal counsel would have had an answer to you already.
I agree with that. Yes, there is some issues that needs to be further researched and a determination made.
Okay, so I have some information relative to the governor making contact with you sometime last week, also the finance chair there, about having a session, calling the Senate into session to deal with the very matter that he took the action of state of, declaration of emergency, state of emergency declaration. But you did not have the votes necessary, did you, to bring that to pass, right?
That is not correct.
That's not the case?
That is not correct. Yes, the governor did have a conversation with us in respect to that, and we, as you can see, prior to this from last week, we already scheduled hearings. We had the budget appropriations and finance hearing scheduled for Wednesday, and we have a procedure to follow within the legislature that we have to at least adhere to our rules that require us to at least have a 7-day notice. So that was done and put in place, and certainly as a follow-up to that, immediately after that, we also put in place a special legislative session for the purpose of then making a determination. Because the governor had already declared and committed to Agreco for payment by today or yesterday, is why I believe he felt the need then to deploy the executive order and also call for the state of emergency. But we had intent, and the notices have already gone out. Individuals were certainly notified of that, to include Government House, that in fact an invitation was sent to the stakeholders for the purpose of the hearing tomorrow and the subsequent session on Thursday.
So what you're saying, the actions of the sessions that were the session that was planned is as a result of the governor reaching out?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. I want to ask Senator Fred Gregory. Made a comment about the bills, right? That have been, the governor is taking the action to pay the $11 million, and then you ask, well, once that is paid off, what happens next? Well, if those semi-autonomous entities would continue paying their bills, then probably WAPA would not have that issue, would they? Well, what do you think about that?
So I agree with you. However, one of the things that I neglected to share as I spoke earlier is the fact that there are a number of executive branch agencies that in fact owe our hospitals. Our Department of Labor, our Bureau of Corrections, and the fact that the Medicaid program, and the fact that we have borders in our hospitals. And it is important that we do not ignore the fact that we have borders. It's important that we recognize that in order to backfill the hospitals, in particular their budget, we have their ability to operate. We have to figure out how do we backfill and address the matters with regards to our borders. So that's a matter that needs to be addressed by the executive branches, Department of Human Services, as well as the Department of Health. So these are things that we have to contemplate, but we can't look at the hospitals in particular, because I have my own concerns about waste management. But our hospitals in particular, if we are going to start taking their allotments to pay their utility bills, then in fact, we should be doing likewise to those departments and agencies who are responsible for paying the hospital who's providing services to them as well. It's just fair across the board. I think that, a lot of times we are very bureaucratic and we don't understand that, the hospitals in this instance have to operate. So only when we find ourselves in a situation where we go to the hospital and they don't have the services, that's when it's going to hit us dead on. But I believe that we have to be fair and provide those funding to the hospital. And we are prepared as a finance committee to, in fact, do the necessary line item to ensure that those bills are paid. Make the projections around those expenses. So we have to be fair across the board. And I know there was also a comment made about the fact that, we've been subsidizing the hospitals. We subsidize the hospitals with the ARPA dollars. That was said. But the most subsidy that has been received with our ARPA dollars was to WAPA. And I mean, how do you balance healthcare and utility and light? How?
And so I guess to follow up to that, how about the Senate, the government as a whole, look at those various issues that you mentioned so that it does not fall back on WAPA, right? So the amounts owed are not even that much in the scheme of things, $11 million, right? A great portion, Wang Louis, Schneider, and Vitima, Waste Management. If those entities would do their part, then probably WAPA would not have been in that situation.
I concur. And there are things that we have to contemplate. When it comes to our waste management, this body created the Virgin Islands Waste Management Authority. It used to be, I think, a part of Public Works. And we also have to take responsibility, so I agree with you, because the waste management was never properly funded. There's some things that need to occur with waste management. And we've worked on legislation around it. But the type of conversations that we've gotten, nobody wants to touch us looking at, when you look across the globe, in the world, trash is not free. So there are things and tough decisions that we have to make as a territory. We either do that or we figure out how to generate new revenues, not on the backs of the people, new revenues coming into the territory so we could take care of all these necessary agencies.
And so I guess, for the Senate President and for everyone, so is there some, accountability on your end in the general scheme of things here? I know, you're coming out with this press event for WAPA, but then you're looking at all these other areas that is affecting the whole situation. You mentioned the Waste Management Authority. What about the Senate's part? Like you mentioned, are you going to take some action and finally make a decision on the Waste Management Authority and whether that allocation should be going there every year like that, right? Is the Senate going to put forth legislation to deal with that?
Well, you know that the Senate have done a number of things to put forth legislation and create accountability across the board. And yes, there's some discussion about how do we create perhaps a similar single payers utility for the semi-autonomous agencies that will be able to collect this money and make sure that it's paid to WAPA. And but we have to understand that it's really one government. When you look at this, it's really one government. And if we fell short of our revenues across the board, then we have to prioritize where those revenues go. And that's where we find ourselves all the time in a quagmire in being able to make that determination as we move forward. But we understand and we're sympathetic to our hospitals, to waste management in those areas. But when you look at other agencies as well, they complain about not being adequately funded to the levels that they have. But we could only spend what we have, or what we are able to get in. So we have to understand that. And there's no way in this current climate, when we see what our community is experiencing, the high cost of food and medication and everything else, that we could start to talk about having new fines or fees and those type of things, because it'll just be a hardship on all people, and we can't put them through that at this time. And
so just a few more. Is the Senate seen as weak then, right? If OMB and Finance could just decide, the governor made the state of emergency declaration, we're not coming. Are you prepared to issue subpoenas, or are you just going to make this announcement and then go home?
Absolutely. We're here because, number one, we want the community to understand that the legislature have a perspective. Two, that if it need be, that we'll take this matter to the next level, which is to the judicial branch if necessary. But three, when the elephants fight, the grass gets trampled. And we want to make sure that we're, working or at least collaborating with the executive branch, because we need that information in order to make informed decision. So we're not weak at all. There is a mechanism that has been put in place that you could circumvent for a period of time, but certainly you need us. So at some point, we'll be able to reel this in and be able to get these individuals here to be able to be accountable for it, because all they have been able to pay thus far under this state of emergency is the 2.3 to Agreco. We still have the issues in terms of the payment for waste management and the hospital, which requires appropriation from this body.
So lastly, this press conference was just to announce your stance, but we are not getting any real action from the Senate.
The real action from the Senate comes tomorrow when we are able to hear from the stakeholders, and then on session on Thursday, where we will put in place what we believe will be an accountable, responsible legislation, again, to replenish. As the chair indicated, we want to make sure that the utilization of the stabilization fund, that there will be a mechanism in place to make sure that it's replenished. We have worked hard, damn hard, to make sure that we continue to fund this stabilization fund for this purpose. When we have rough days, we're getting ready to go into a hurricane season. We don't know what that will look like. So there'll definitely be days that we will have to rely on this stabilization fund to keep us going. So we want to make sure that it's not depleted just on WAPA issues.
Right, okay. Follow-up, Senator, I'm sorry. So at tomorrow's event, you're going to find ways to generate funds to replenish the rainy day fund that the government is using, of course, to make those debt obligations? That's what?
No, we're not finding funds. What we're finding is mechanism. We want to put in place, the mechanism that the rainy day fund will be replenished. There will be future revenues that's coming into the coffers of the government, and rather than utilizing that for other purposes, we want to make sure that we're backfilling backfilling those, that stabilization fund for the rainy day. And before we take on that additional or new initiative, we want to make sure that that continue to exist for the people of the Virgin Islands.
Lastly, to anyone who want to answer this,
Let me follow up on something you said, and just let me share with you, because you're very adamant about this being what our stance is, and just know that we're prepared. We've been working on it for the past, I think, 3 months. We are scrubbing the numbers as it relates to the appropriations that we passed in FY 2024 and looking at the revenues that we're generating. And we are prepared to make the necessary cuts so we can fill the deltas here in the territory.
okay. And lastly, for anyone who wants to answer this, I'll give up the mic now. Are there any new ideas for generating revenue from anyone standing here?
There have been several initiatives that have been deployed for revenue generators. For example, I know that we have the South Shore Enterprise Zone that we have provided the necessary funding for them to be able to go and market it, be a feasibility study. There's a number of initiatives that have been deployed and put in place by my colleagues. But funds are relatively difficult these days as we continue to see and experience the inflation that's happening across the board. It's very difficult. Just in our budget, our 2024 budget, we have not realized the type of numbers that we had expected. We saw the same thing going into 23. So while we continue to look at opportunities for new revenues, that is all predicated and built on the executive branch taking action in some of those areas as well. So yes, we could come up with the initiative, but it rests and requires for the executive branch, to do their part to make sure that we're actually, again, doing the proper collections and moving those initiatives forward, so that we could realize the revenues that we anticipate from those initiatives. Very well. Having no further question, I want to thank my colleagues. Again, today we're standing here 12 strong. I know that 3 of my colleagues are not here today, but they stand in solidarity with us in regards to making sure that we continue to drive home the issue of accountability throughout government. All right, so thank you very much for being here, and we look forward to our discussion tomorrow at the hearing of Budget, Appropriations, and Finance, and subsequently to the special session that would occur on Thursday for the purpose of taking some type of action in whatever, moving a bill, again, in whatever is derived from our discussion tomorrow with those entities that have been invited to be here. Thank you very much, and thank you to my colleagues. I want to thank the staff and central staff for organizing and being present for this press conference. God continue to bless the Virgin Islands. Have a good afternoon.